Broncos with 30, and the lead is 7 with a minute to go. Timeout, Denver.
All right, you ready? No Brandon Ayuk talk in this first hour of the show. Max and I decided in our pre-show meeting we're going to try some NBA out for you guys. I was up late last night watching that and then watching the guys talk about it, Shaq, Barkley, Kenny Smith, and Ernie. The Denver Nuggets face the Minnesota Timberwolves without Anthony Edwards, without Dante DiVincenzo, and without DeSumo, the player that had stepped in this postseason and had been their leading scorer, Minnesota's leading scorer. 3 critical pieces to their team. Yes, the Nuggets were missing a critical piece as well in Gordon, but you got to win that game if you're Nikola Jokic. I talked about this on yesterday's show. His legacy is starting to take on some water. Good morning, everybody. We will talk a little bit about Brandon Ayuk. We'll save some of that for Ben. Ben will join us at 12. Some interesting things that have been learned about sort of the priorities going into the draft and what they really wanted. Sonny Styles was certainly at the top of the list. I don't think they thought they would get Sonny Styles, but I think they're very happy they got Sonny Styles. From Bill, who writes, they're okay with Allegretti. This is going to be the biggest issue in 2026. A center has to be capable at the NFL level with a second-year quarterback going into a new offense. They better be right. Yeah, I talked about on the show yesterday that in a couple of conversations, it kind of came up organically that the concern that fans have and people like me have about the center position, moving on from Tyler Biadasz, and right now having Nick Allegretti on the actual depth chart as the number one center, that is kind of a mystery as to why it happened, a concern about what could come in next year's season without, a bona fide center to add to what is a pretty good offensive line around it. And someone in the know just suggested to me that the players and the coaches and the organization itself, they actually like Nick Allegretti. They think he is a tremendous communicator. That may have been part of the issue with Biadasz. I think somebody's talked about that before. Maybe John, maybe Ben, about the issues with Biadasz may have had more to do with sort of his communication, his ability to sort of decipher what was going on at the line of scrimmage. But apparently they're not as concerned about Nick Allegretti being their starting center next year, if that's the way it plays out. They do have a couple of others that will be on the roster, and I don't think he was plan A. I think Tyler Linderbaum was plan A, but the money got too insane there. So, look, I don't know if this is going to be their undoing, Nick Allegretti at center. I would guess that that's not their undoing, but it is important, especially going into a year in which the quarterback's going to be under center more. Those are the first 2 people to touch the football on every play. We'll see. I don't think it's going to be their undoing, though. I think, if anything, still going into next season, there is the idea that Jaden Daniels just needs to be upright and healthy for 17 games. That is priority number 1. If your best player misses most of the team's games, it's going to be a long season. He has not all of the games, and I think the team will be dramatically improved. All right, we're going to take a shot at the NBA playoffs here. I was watching all 3 games last night. My God, the Knicks held the largest halftime lead in a playoff game in NBA history. In a Game 6 up 3-2, they led the Atlanta Hawks by 47 at halftime. 47 points. 83-36. They didn't score for the final minute 48 of the first half. I thought they had a very good chance, and they had some open looks over the final minute 48 of the first half to actually get to 90 at halftime and maybe increase the lead to 50 Plus, the lead was at 50 at one point in the first half and climbed even higher than that in the second half. They ended up winning the game by 51. 51 points they won the game by, 140 to 89. But they actually had a shot. It was 83 to 32 at one point, and they actually had a shot multiple times, open threes in the final minute 48, and they went scoreless after erupting for the first 22 and a half minutes of the first half. I was kind of rooting to see how big the lead could become. Look, I don't personally like the Knicks to make a run to the championship. I like the Celtics more than I like the Knicks in the East. I actually think with Embiid, the 76ers wouldn't be the best matchup for the Knicks, but there's going to be a lot of Knicks conversation coming off what they did from down 2-1 in that series. They destroyed Atlanta in 3 straight games by 16, by 29, and then by 51 points after losing back-to-back 1-point games. They'll get the winner of the Celtics 76er series, which is now knotted at 3 games apiece. Game 7 tomorrow at 7:30 on NBC. A 7th and deciding game between Philadelphia and Boston. For you old heads out there, this used to be the rivalry. It was Lakers-Celtics when you got to the finals, but the 76ers and the Celtics in the 80s and, really in the 80s had an unbelievable rivalry where the Celtics with Larry Bird and with McHale and with Parrish and DJ and Ainge and the whole group, they actually owned the 76ers until Dr. J put on a show in a Game 7 in Boston Garden and finally got past the Celtics. This is, for those two fan bases, this is a big deal. This is a big series. The 76ers were down 3-1. They've won 2 straight with Joel Embiid back in the lineup, and he's pretty good. This just in. When he's healthy, he is a great player, and it's a different team with him. They've got a tremendous backcourt in Maxey and Edgecombe. By the way, Kelly Oubre plays for the 76ers, if you didn't know that. And Oubre's effective, man. He is still one of those dudes that just plays hard, super hard, and can do it on the defensive end. He'll rebound. He'll score if that's what's required. But that should be an absolute thriller tomorrow night. Boston's a 7.5-point favorite. I give the Sixers a shot to win that game outright. And then we get to what happened late last night in Minnesota. I'm telling you, this was, I don't care if you're an NBA fan, if you're a basketball fan, if you're a sports fan, this was for about 3 quarters and 8 minutes of the fourth quarter. This was as intense as it gets in sports, team sports competition. You got a team that has to win to stay alive. You got another team that's down 3 critical players and is a 6-point underdog at home. And the 2 teams can't stand each other. This is a rivalry that nobody talks about, nobody knows about, Minnesota and Denver in the postseason the last few years. And you got Nikola Jokic at 31 years old out there basically by himself last night. Cam Johnson played well, but Jamal Murray was an absolute mess. And Jokic nearly carried them to a Game 7. And I'm going to talk about his overall series here in a moment and talk about him a little bit more than I have recently. He had 28, 10 assists, 9 rebounds in the game. He came out basically in the second half and scored 21 of his 28 points in the second half and was just an absolute facilitator, creator. I mean, the only time Denver was capable offensively in the game was with the ball in Jokic's hands for his decision-making. But Minnesota, guys, if you like nasty, tough, just gritty sports teams in any sport, the Minnesota Timberwolves are your team. Jaden McDaniels, you guys may not know a lot about Jaden McDaniels. He's actually been on an all-defensive team in the NBA. He was a first-round pick out of Washington, the University of, back in 2020. He's still a young player at 24 years old, 25 years old, something like that. He's 6'9", 6'8", about 200 pounds tops, and 195, thin. But he is as good a defender and as tough a competitor as you will see in the NBA, and he completely made life miserable for one of the real clutch performers in the postseason in the NBA in recent years, and one of the really good scorers in the NBA, Jamal Murray, who went 4 for 17 last night. Jaden McDaniels completely wore him out. And then Jalen Clark off the bench last night, not a guy that plays a ton, but because of the injuries, they only had 8 eligibles last night. In an NBA playoff game, in a closeout game, they only had 8 players that were healthy. 8. Now, you might say, well, that's enough. Not when you're getting in foul trouble, and they had some foul trouble. Rudy Gobert was in foul trouble. Jaden McDaniels was in foul trouble. But Jalen Clark, this guy may be, as far as on-ball defenders, the best in the NBA. The best. Played at UCLA, was a second-round pick in 2023, 6'5", 210, and just relentless. He caused havoc all night long. And then Terrence Shannon, for you Big Ten college basketball fans, he was so good at Illinois. So good at Illinois. This dude gets his opportunity last night with all the injuries. He goes for 24 points on an absolute explosive night where no one could check him. Now, he's left-handed. I don't know what Denver was doing. They let a left-hander who is super quick, super explosive, go left the entire night. They just opened it up and said, sure, go left. I was screaming. I really wanted Denver to force a Game 7. Big Jokic fan, really wanted him to get through this series because I knew it would look poorly on him if he didn't. And they're letting a left-hander who literally is his explosive first step, has an explosive first step, and then has a ridiculous ability to close and dunk at the rim over people. They're just saying, sure, go left all night long, and that's what he did. Denver's a bad defensive team. Minnesota's a great defensive team, but here's the bottom line. You can't lose this game if you are one of the greatest that's ever done it. Mike doesn't lose that game. Magic doesn't lose that game. Bird doesn't lose that game. LeBron doesn't lose that game. And in terms of the centers, there's no way Shaquille O'Neal loses that game or Kareem loses that game. Russell, Wilt, I don't know, didn't see him play. Hakeem doesn't lose that game. None of the great centers. You don't lose to a team that has 8 players and is down 3 of their best. Jokic was good last night, but he wasn't good enough. He said it after the game. He said, it's on me. This guy is, you talk about just the absolute gem of a team sport athlete. Nikola Jokic is that. It was not about anybody else last night in terms of taking blame. Took it all and credited Minnesota, over and over again. Total class act. But he wasn't good enough. He wasn't good enough in the series. He had 2 bad games in a row. He's never really had, coming into this season, a bad playoff game. Minnesota was a problem. Rudy Gobert for him was a problem. The perimeter defense was a problem. But when he did not sit in the second half until he didn't sit. Didn't come out of the game. I think maybe a little offense-defense substitution in the final 30 seconds. Played 43 minutes, sat for basically 4.5 minutes in the first half. That was it. 28 points, 10 assists, 9 rebounds. He had 4 turnovers, and he was a bit of a turnover problem because of the defense. A lot of it was forced, some of it wasn't. But he got no help last night. And yet it doesn't matter. It's going to fall on him. He's got one title. He's got one finals appearance, and he has not been past the second round since leading Denver to its lone NBA title in 2023. And now he's got a first-round exit against a team whose 28.8-point leading scorer sat out the last 3 games. Sat out game 6, injured for game 6, game 5, and it's 2.5 games he got injured during game 4. And then their best shooter done for the postseason. And then their leading scorer in this series hurt last night, did not play, the kid from Illinois, DeSumo. He was really good at Illinois too. I think he ended up transferring. But Nikola Jokic, the opportunities, they're not many left. I mean, 4 years, there'll be 35, 36, 5 years left in a conference that has Oklahoma City in it, that has San Antonio in it. It's going to be, I said this to Legler the other day when I had him on, said it to somebody else right before the playoffs began, that I kind of felt like going into this postseason, Jokic needs a run here. Like if they had gotten to the next round and beaten San Antonio with Wemby, that would have probably been good enough because Oklahoma City is an absolute buzzsaw. I mean, it's going to be worth the absolute watching of every minute of every game for San Antonio, Oklahoma City, if that's what we get in the Western Conference Finals, and I think we will. But Nikola Jokic, one of the most gifted, talented, incredibly unbelievable passer, unbelievable just decision maker, facilitator, not a great defender. He's not going to go down as one of the great defensive centers of all time. He is not a rim protector. Not that. But just 3 years ago, it was like, we may be talking about Nikola Jokic in 3, 4, 5 years as the greatest center in the history of the game. That conversation is over. He's going to be on the list of the 5, 6, 7 greatest of all time, but you have to have playoff success. This is the sport which is judged. People judge and create legacies around rings. He's got one, and he hasn't been close to another after winning that one. Bad loss by Denver. But to be honest with you, in watching every single game of this series, they didn't deserve it, and they weren't as good as Minnesota. Minnesota was tougher, and that was intensity last night. I mean, you had a bit of a fracas with Jokic and the kid Jalen Clark. Then Naz Reid got into it. There were texts. They frustrated the big fella. Man, that was fun to watch last night. I love a night like last night much more than talking about Brandon Ayuk. I swear on my children that's true. But the Brandon Ayuk story is important as well. All right, we're going to try this. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. NBA playoffs, open phones. But the one question I want to ask those of you that have been paying attention is, do you agree with me that the Joker's legacy has taken a hit in recent years and really took one last night, losing a game to a team that had 8 players and was down 2 of their 3 best in this postseason? 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
I mean, that's not my decision, to be honest. Definitely, if you're in Serbia, you will get fired.
You piped me up late for that. What did he say? Sorry.
Said if we were in Serbia, we would all be fired.
I love the Joker. I love him. He's one of my favorite team sport athletes. I watched his presser last night on NBA TV. Just took it all. Had a bit of a sense of humor about it. Gave the proper credit to the team that was the tougher team. And look, they were the better team over 6 games. But the question for me is, as a big Joker fan, has his reputation, has his legacy taken a bit of a hit post-2023 when they won the title over the Miami Heat in 5 games? You know, prior to that, they had been to the conference finals just once. That was in the bubble in 2020 when they lost to the Lakers, when they lost to Anthony Davis and LeBron. But since winning the title, they have been knocked out in the second round, and now the first round
Fun
of
fact
the NBA playoffs.
on Jokic,
second round, and first round in 3 straight years, twice by Minnesota.
Never beaten a playoff team
really
with more
turned
than 50
into their
wins.
rival. I'm sorry, Max?
Never beaten a playoff team with more than 50 wins, quiet as it's kept.
They've never, I mean, the Heat weren't a 50-win team. The Lakers weren't a 50-win team when they beat them in the Western Conference Finals a few years ago. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. But, look, I think he's one of the greatest passing big men I've ever seen. I think he's one of the highest IQ centers I've ever seen. I think he's one of the most unique centers. Of course, the game has changed, and we see bigs that shoot a lot of threes. That was a big problem for him in this series. His three-point shooting was woeful. He shot 19.4% from behind the arc. Last in the year that they won the title in 23, he shot 46.1% from behind the arc. 19.4% from the field. He was 44.6%. It was his worst playoff shooting percentage. This was, this is hard for people who didn't watch to believe that he wasn't good enough when he averaged 25.8 points per game, 13.2 rebounds per game, and 9.5 assists per game. But he wasn't good enough. He had 2 bad games, and last night he was good, but he wasn't great. And he needed to be great to force a Game 7 back home to win it. They needed to win this series. He's one of my favorites, but he's not a good defensive center, never has been. He's not a rim protector. It's his offensive brilliance that has put him in the conversation in recent years as not only, a player that's a multi-time MVP, in addition to his finals MVP in 2023, but into the conversation of the greatest centers in the history of the game. Got to have more postseason success for that to be the case. And, I know he's only 31, but it kind of feels like he's running out of time. They need a better team around him. I'll just say that. They missed Gordon a lot. He only played sparingly in this series. That's the second straight year they've been without him for big parts of playoff games, and he is, arguably their third best player and really their a key defensively for them. Yeah. All right. This is NBA Open Phones, NBA playoffs. Open phones at 301-230-0980. And I'll just start off the conversation. You can add to this any way you want in terms of any of the other series, but has Nikola Jokic's legacy / reputation taken a hit? Start with our guy, Lap. Lap, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Kevin?
Hey, Lap.
Thanks for taking my call, bro.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, man. He is amazing, man. I just think, you're going to look at his playoff, record, just a little differently because of his matchups and what he does. I mean, he's still putting up crazy numbers, man. But I don't think it's going to be as bad. He's still going to be a Hall of Famer.
That's not the conversation. He is a first ballot lock, Hall of Famer, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about how
Yeah, so they,
3 years ago, the conversation around the Joker was this guy's fast become one of the greatest to ever do it, and he finally has broken through, won a title. This dude's a 3-time MVP. Now he's got a finals MVP, and he's going to dominate the postseason with Denver for the next, half decade. And that has not happened. Not happened at all.
Yeah,
And the chances of it happening
yeah.
seem to be dwindling.
Yeah, they definitely need to give them some help. Another maybe small forward or consistent guard. I'm saying, off the bench would definitely help. Maybe another solid big man that can, come in and be the bruiser type. But I don't know if you watch Gil's Arenas where Kenya Martin and Rashad
No.
McCants always goes back about. Yeah, they go back and forth about. Wemby being younger and better, the future, and then Jokic. So it's unfortunate we didn't get that matchup. So I'm curious to see what they're going to say. And we never got the matchup in the finals with Embiid and Jokic, too. So that's more so where he's going to be defined at, Kevin, with those matchups. And it would have been nice to see him against Wemby to see how that, in the playoff environment. Yeah.
In the short term, Lap, thanks for the call as always. I was looking forward so much to seeing Denver, San Antonio, to seeing Jokic and Wemby. And I actually thought in many ways the matchup against San Antonio for Denver was a little bit better than it was against Minnesota. I think everybody knew that this Minnesota series was going to be brutal. Before the postseason started, I said, this is the series to watch. These two teams don't like each other. Minnesota has matched up well with Denver in recent years. Gobert has a chance to give Joker a problem. They are incredible as a perimeter defending team. And you're right. They need more pieces. They missed Gordon a lot in this series. There is no doubt about it. They missed Gordon a ton. They missed Peyton Watson a ton. They had two key pieces out as well. But when Anthony Edwards and his 29 a game don't play in 2.5 games, and then their best outside shooter in DiVincenzo, he doesn't play for basically 3 games. And then Ayuma Dosunmu, the player who had led them in scoring in the first 5 games of this series, he gets hurt in Game 6. You're a 6-point favorite on the road to extend the series to 7, and you can't get it done. And look, Minnesota was great. They deserved it. It wasn't like Denver just handed it to them. They took it. But the greatness of this, the conversation about the all-time greats includes, in this kind of moment, you got to carry your team over this particular team given the situation and get to the next round, the second round, not the finals, not the conference finals, just the second round. Anthony, go ahead.
For the nonsensible people out there, his legacy will take a hit. But who came to the dance with him last night?
I know. You're
Basically
right.
Basically nobody. People tend to forget that basketball is a 5-person game. It's not a 1-on-5 game. So earlier you rattled off all of these people that you said they wouldn't have lost the game. Under certain circumstances, you never know what might have happened.
Well, we know that LeBron, with basically dudes like you and me out there, took the Cavs to the finals against Golden State in that first year and won 2 games with Dellavedova in the backcourt. And, and Iman Shumpert, who, by the way, is excellent on TV. And you can say 2 different positions, but Jokic is their primary facilitator, their primary ball handler in a lot of spots. He brings the ball up court.
Kevin, I understand all of that. What I'm saying is, even when LeBron was doing what he was doing, even when Magic did what he did in the finals against the Sixers, in Game 7.
Without Kareem,
He still
it was Game 6. Yeah.
He still had help. Other people have to come to the game.
Well, Jamal Murray's a great
1-on-5
player and
game.
has been a great playoff performer. He didn't play well last night. He didn't play well in the series. It's not like going into the game, Jamal Murray would be on a short list of players you'd love to have as the other guy. And he didn't do it. I understand what you're saying.
Exactly.
He had to do it by himself last night because Murray didn't do it. And they've counted on Murray in these big spots before over and over again. And he was D'd up by McDaniels and then by Clark. I mean, that dude, it needs a nap after this series, a long one.
The greatest example of all of this is Will Chamberlain. How many monster games did he have, and his team around him wasn't good enough?
Well, I mean, West and Goodrich and Elgin. He had some teams with some pretty good players in LA.
But the point is, they weren't good enough.
So net it out. You don't think Jokers? You think one title, one deep playoff run will be enough for him to be considered one of the greatest centers in the history of the game? 10 years from now, we're having a conversation, and he never gets past the second round again, and we've got 2023, and that's it. He's in the conversation with Kareem and Wilt and Russell and Shaq and Olajuwon. You're saying that? Because I think that's where it takes a hit.
What I'm saying is, yes, he in people's eyes, he will take a hit. But my larger point is, excuse me, he can't do it by himself. So when his teams don't advance, he takes the weight. But hypothetically, let's say he scored 60 points last night and they still lost. What's the narrative then?
Yeah, but hypothetically, if he had just scored 40 instead of 28 and he had that opportunity, he once again could not knock down a big three when they needed it. You know, he had an open look with the score tied. So did Murray in the fourth quarter. So those are the shots he needed to hit for them to get past this game, and he didn't make them. He had a good game. You look at it statistically, you're like, what's wrong with 28, 10, and 9? Well, there were a couple of big spots defensively where he couldn't secure a big rebound, and Minnesota had 19 offensive rebounds in this game. A lot of it was because of Jokic defensively, and then there were a couple of spots offensively, even down the stretch, where he had some open looks from three because Gobert's not chasing him out there, and he could not knock it down. He shot 19% from behind the arc. You just look at his three-point shooting alone in this series, and it's probably the difference at the very least of at least playing a seventh game. And he didn't get it done. Okay. That's that. Look, I watched every minute of this series. This was not a great performance by Nikola Jokic in the postseason. It wasn't.
Okay, I got you. Before you let me go.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to ask you this. What is the biggest infraction in the NBA that doesn't get called?
Travel because of the gathering step? What?
Carrying, palming.
Oh, well, that's been for years now. Carrying the ball, you now see at the youth level, they don't call carrying. Guys take the ball, they got their hand under the ball, and they that's how they'll handle it.
It's just out of
but the gathering step for me, I still what I don't like is and by the way, Jokic is a massive offender on this. He'll get the ball, let's just say, at the top of the key after he passes it and it comes right back to him, and he'll literally shuffle once or twice before putting the ball on the floor. Beal used to be the worst, used to drive me nuts. He'd catch and he'd take 3 or 4 steps, and they called it, it's a gathering step. The gathering step creates advantage too often for me. I'd like to see it called more, but they're not going to.
One more quick thing. The game the other night, I forgot who was playing, but they called the charge, and they reviewed it, and they said it was a blocking foul. But the guy was previously palming the ball. He throws the guy over.
He committed 4 violations before.
Loaf of bread.
Yeah.
Yes, and they didn't call the damn carry before the charge.
Yeah.
It's
look. If you're
completely out of
just
control.
and you're not this person, but for a lot of people that just start to tune in this time of year, or maybe for the finals, they're shocked at what they watch because it's different. The game's just completely different in so many ways. But with respect to he didn't have enough help, that's true. Jamal Murray was the biggest culprit in this series in terms of help. But Jokic could have done more last night. He could have. He admitted it after the game. G from the shop. What's up?
Joker, one of my favorite players to watch. In this
I know.
era. He played perfect basketball. But one thing for sure, they are a mediocre team when Aaron Gordon is not playing on the court.
Crucial loss. Peyton Watson
Jamal
too.
Murray,
G.
No. More so Aaron Gordon. He's the linchpin of their team. On top of Jamal Murray turned into John Starks last night and stunk the gym up.
He really did.
But I'm with you, Sheehan. In these situations with Timberwolves down that many of their key players, Aaron Gordon was out. If Bird had McHale out, Bird is going for 50. You only shot the basketball 19 times, Joker. Like, that's why I love Joker, because he played perfect basketball. He played the right way. But in them types of instances, in elimination games, sometimes you got to be a little selfish and you got to shoot 40 times. You got to go for 50.
He only had 7 points at halftime.
Exactly, Sheehan. You should have had at least 42 because you had 21 in the second half. You got to play a little selfish and know the temperature of the game sometimes. You got to see Jamal Murray stinking the gym up. They strapping. They only got 8 dudes. Oh, no, I'm putting attack mode every time. And I know you play the right way, Joker, but sometimes you got to deviate from that and put them on your back offensively. You got to shoot the basketball 40 times. He only had 10 rebounds. You got to have 17 rebounds.
He should have had 17 rebounds. He gave up a lot of those offensive rebounds. It was him not securing a defensive rebound.
Exactly. And Larry Bird would have had 15 rebounds. Shaq would have had 40 and 20. You know what I'm saying? And Joker, my man, he is the best.
I know. Best
passing big man ever. Like that I've seen is him and Arvidas. Like, to me, hands down. But in them types of instances, you got to know the temperature of the game, and you got to know, man, if I don't go for 50, we going home.
There were times, and he did try to take it over in the second half from a scoring standpoint, but down the stretch in the fourth quarter, he thought, I think they all thought eventually Jamal Murray's going to hit some big shots because you know why? He's done that in his career. He's done that. He's had bad starts and strong finishes. But you said it. They strapped him down. And the other part of it, and so I was watching Jokic, and I'm like, forget it. You got to go score. You got to go get to the free throw line. One of the two.
Doing the same thing, Shan. I'm yelling at the TV the same way.
Yeah, but Gobert. But by the way, it was not easy. Even though he did score when he took Gobert down inside the paint, it wasn't easy for him.
Hey, Sheehan, I'm talking about my bum ass. If I'm on that team and I'm Joker and I see they only suiting up 8 players, I'm fouling out 3 of them on my own.
Yeah,
because
he shot 6 free throws. You got to have 15, 16 free throw attempts in that game. Yeah.
There you go again, and that gets you to 50. And Larry Bird would have went for 50. Yeah. And my thing is, it to me, even a more tip of a cap to the Timberwolves. And I tell Lord G this all the time with his basketball, him coming up and playing basketball. It ain't always about having the best players on the court, because we see the Timberwolves had their best player not there. And you got to compete and play with toughness and intensity.
How tough is Jaden McDaniels, G?
No, he's super tough. Super tough, and you shortchange him. He's 6'10". He about 7'4" with them arms.
And those arms are long.
His offensive game is getting better every day. And like you brought up Terrence Shannon. Terrence Shannon almost damn near 28, 30 years old. Everybody got a different path. He has circumstances and injuries.
Yeah, there were some issues at Illinois, right? Yeah.
But at the same time, when everything lines up, supreme all-star level type score in the league. You talk about he lefty, everything left, still like Victor.
How did they let him continue to go
him.
left downhill? How did that happen last night?
When you're that elite, like Victor Page used to be.
No, you overplay and you say, let me see you do it going the other way. At least once.
But
at least once.
But it show how explosive Turn Shannon is, man.
Yeah, but they gave him his left. They gave him his left. No, you can take away his left. You can force him to go right, and maybe look. This dude could flat out score it. At Illinois, I loved watching him, and he is so athletic. But they never took away his left hand, and they gave him too much space to get downhill. That dunk that he had in the first half, at the end of the second quarter, the head was above the rim. What he do. Listen, I know.
Listen, Sheehan, you brought my man Oubre up earlier because Oubre is my guy too, and we talked about this like last year. Oubre and Turn Shannon, elite athletes, super quick, super high jumping dudes that would be Pro Bowl, all pro type of football players too, because they play with that type of athleticism and toughness. Man.
Yeah. Just like, John Wall would have been that as a D end or a linebacker or a tight end or a receiver. Yeah.
But what it come down to, Joker is an all-time great, but he does have to get another one. He does have to get that killer instinct. Don't rest on your laurels, and sometimes you got to play a little selfish, man, because when Jamal Murray looking like John Starks in Game 7, like, you got to take over, man, and that's what the greats do.
Good call, as always. Mike, Saeed, Joe, anybody else on hold, stay there. The question is, did Joker's legacy, reputation take a hit losing to the Minnesota Timberwolves without their best player, without their leading scorer as well in the postseason last night in Game 6, with one of their best shooters? They had 8 players that played in the game last night, basically 8 that were going to play, and that was it. And they lost a game in which they were a 6-point favorite, and he hasn't been past the second round since his team won the title in 2023. You can add anything else you want about the NBA playoffs. 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. My buddy said, don't forget, they had the gambler on the 2016 Cavs, James Jones. Yeah, he's the one, right? That's in trouble right now. Didn't he plead guilty? Is it the James Jones is he the one, or is my buddy wrong? The point is that the 2016 Cavaliers had, Timothy Mozgov, Amon Shumpert. Again, he is good on TV if you haven't seen him. He's excellent as an analyst. They had the guy that's now a great golfer, the scorer off the bench, J.R. Smith.
You're thinking of Damon Jones, I think.
Oh, that's right. It's Damon Jones. Yeah. Timmy, you're wrong. Different Jones. Damon Jones is different than James Jones. Although Damon Jones was a LeBron guy too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Matthew Dellavedova. I mean, he had nothing. And Kevin Love, remember, got hurt. And he carried that team to the finals. Who coached that team? Was it the Israeli guy? Yeah, David Blatt coached that team. Mike and Frederick, go ahead. It's NBA Open Phone Friday, NBA playoffs, Open Phone Friday. We've never done this before. But I'm starting it off with the question, did the Joker's legacy take a hit in this series, not getting by the Timberwolves, who were without their obvious best player in Anthony Edwards? They were without Dante DiVincenzo, and they were without Sumo, the guy that had played earlier in the series and had been their leading scorer. He went for 43 in Game 4. They didn't have him last night. Mike and Frederick, go.
Hey, Kevin. I enjoy this topic, and part of the reason I called in was when I heard you say we'll try this NBA and see how it goes. And maybe I'm in the minority, but I think there's a lot more people that enjoy your NBA playoff talk. I can think back over the last 10 years, every spring, I enjoy your analysis. And the last 10 years, we talk about, LeBron, Curry, even Durant, the Joker, their ranking among the top 10 or top 15. And
yeah.
Every spring,
those conversations are fun in any sport. The GOAT conversation or the Mount Rushmore conversation. But this player is just a fascinating situation because it was a foregone conclusion 3 years ago that he's going to go down as one of the greatest to ever do it. He's a 3-time MVP, people. 3-time MVP. He wins the finals. They win it easily over the Heat, and it's going to be the first of several to come. And now it looks like there are no more coming. No more. Not in the current situation. I was looking at his contract structure. He's got 1 year left on his $276 million deal that he signed a few years ago. And then there's a player option. It's very similar to the Anthony Davis deal. I wonder, I don't think Jokic would ever look to get out, but I wonder if there's an opportunity. He's not a join somebody else kind of a guy, but he needs more support if he's going to get to where he wants to get back to. Go ahead.
Well, I love Jokic's game just about as much as you do, and I love his intelligence and his passing and the way he talks at the mic. But I did cringe a little bit a few years ago when you said maybe he could be the best center, because I don't think that'll ever surpass Kareem unless Wemby. But I do think he's still in that top 6. I mean, you named them: Kareem, Wilt, Russell. And then it's Akeem, Shaq, and the Joker. He's somewhere in that mix, although he's probably, one of the worst defenders of any of the all-time greats.
Of the greatest centers, he might be the absolute worst defender. He is at times a crafty defender, but he is not what you would ever refer to as a rim-protecting center. He's not that.
Right. But I think you got the top 6. And so
Kareem, Wilt, Russell.
Take a slight hit.
Kareem, Wilt, Russell, Shaq,
Hakeem, Shaq, and the Joker
Hakeem.
in some order.
Hakeem, for me, I've probably said this many times before. Hakeem, for me, I'd actually take him over Shaq. I know that that doesn't
I agree.
wash well with a lot of people.
I would too.
But he is the
too.
greatest. I mean, Russell is, I guess. But in my lifetime of watching the NBA, he's the best two-way center of all time because he was a dominant defensive center.
Now, as far as this series, I was rooting for Denver too last night, but I was not surprised because it disappointed me the game where the Villanova kid went out and Edwards went out in the first half, and Denver could not win that game. And
I know
I thought they were over then. And the Aaron Gordon missing is a big piece,
massive,
because he's so athletic, and he compliments Joker. You notice he's down in that short corner dunker spot, and the game his hamstring was bothering him. Joker threw that pass to him out of that spot, and he didn't even jump. All he did was
you're right.
just catch the ball. He didn't finish at all. So that was a
well, we've
big,
now had basically multiple postseasons in a row where Gordon's injuries have been a major factor. Remember last year he was playing, but he was not anywhere near 100%. And I get it, and G and Paulie and others have DM'd me that's as big a loss as what Minnesota had. That's not true. They did not have one of the best 5, 6, 7 players in the NBA and Anthony Edwards for the last 2.5 games. But Aaron Gordon was crucial for that team. By the way, this year in the regular season, as was Peyton Watson. And their role players just did not do a good enough job at all. Cam Johnson last night knocked down some big shots, but that was it.
Yes, sir. Well, Aaron Gordon's not the leader. Anthony Edwards sets the tone and leads that Timberwolves team. So it's amazing what they're doing without him.
Yeah.
And
Mike, I got to go. I'm up against a hard break.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I appreciate what Minnesota did in this series. They were one tough, physically intense team start to finish. There's still some callers. Stay on hold if you want. We'll do this for a few more minutes. NBA playoff open phones. But the question is, do you think Nikola Jokic's legacy, his reputation, has taken a hit? He has not been back anywhere near the NBA Finals since winning it 3 years ago. And he just led a team that lost to a team without their best players, or two of them in this series anyway, including Anthony Edwards. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. from Ken. Kareem and Russell, much better defensive centers than Olajuwon. I said Russell. Kareem's debatable to me. I mean, Kareem, I looked it up during the break. I mean, Olajuwon was a two-time defensive player of the year, 9 times all defensive team, a 3-time block shot champion or leader. Olajuwon's in the conversation of the greatest defensive center ever. I understand Russell's, defense, rebounding, etc. I didn't watch Russell. I don't, but Kareem was an absolute force defensively. Don't get me wrong, but I mentioned Russell. If I didn't mention Kareem, that's fine. But Olajuwon's in that conversation. He's definitely in that conversation. He was a great defensive center and then an unbelievably versatile offensive center. All right, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Some Dan Quinn on Sonny Styles coming up here momentarily, but we'll just take a few more calls, and I appreciate the interest in this topic because I'm interested in it. And last night's game between Denver and Minnesota, in terms of just a sporting event, the intensity, the desperation, one team backed into a corner, has to win to survive. It was really a compelling watch. Minnesota down so many players, basically played 8, and that was it. That's really all they had to play. Really intense, fun game to watch. Did the Joker's legacy take a hit not getting past Minnesota here in the first round? Joe in Springfield's been on hold. Joe, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, what's going on?
Hey, Joe.
So let me make a quick point about the Joker, then I'll also like to talk about the Eastern playoff series, if I may.
Sure.
So the legacy for Joker, I mean, yeah, he has lost. He hasn't won a final since 2023. I mean, he hasn't been to the,
conference finals since 2023. Hadn't been past the second round.
Well, Kevin, last year, I mean, there was an epic 7-game series against OKC that could have gone either way. And if Gordon was
and they
healthy,
got blown out in game 7,
maybe they would have made it then too. Right, game 7, but still, if Gordon was healthy, who knows? But yeah, it has taken.
I mean, Indiana took Oklahoma City to 7-2. Let's not forget that.
That's true. I mean, yeah, but I mean, if Joker is facing a team that is depleted and down only 8 players, you know it's your time to step up if that happens. And the centers you just mentioned, they would not have voted like that. They definitely would have stepped up big time. So, yeah, I mean, it has taken a back step. We'll see what happens in the future for Joker. Now, as for the East, look, yes, the Knicks did win and a blowout, and it was definitely laughable for sure. Who knows what they do against either the Sixers or the Celtics, but any 3 of those teams can win against each other. And remember one thing, Ken, we haven't talked about this. There's an opportunity that a number 1 seed in the East tonight, the Pistons, could lose to an 8 seed in the Magic. Because the Magic win tonight, there you go, the Pistons are out. So the East could be wide open right now, Kevin. Who knows? That's what's so much fun about the NBA playoffs. I mean, some fans may not think it's entertaining. I'm with you. It's entertaining for sure. So take care, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Always. Yeah, I mean, Banchero tonight can really sort of start to put his name into the conversation of true young superstars in the game. I mean, he had 45 the other night when they were trying to close out Detroit on the road. He was unbelievable the other night. The one thing about Banchero, he gets a little bit loose with the ball occasionally, and he will turn it over. But he had 45 points on the road in a game 5 in the postseason as they try as an 8 seed to knock out the 1 seed. Detroit can't shoot the basketball. That's their biggest problem. But I would not be shocked at all if Orlando wins tonight and knocks out Detroit. TC, finish it up for us. Go ahead.
Yes, I think that the Joker's legacy is still intact. I look at Joker and I look at one thing. Everybody else, all these big men throughout the years in history or whatever the case can be, they always have help or another superstar. Joker with Denver, since he's been there, has nothing.
Well, Jamal Murray's not nothing. Jamal Murray has not been nothing.
Hold on. Let me finish. When I say nothing, majority of the other teams have another superstar. Jamal Murray does many games, especially a lot of games. He has good games, but he be missing plenty since Joker's been there.
You're
you
right.
know it, and I know it.
You're right.
But
He's also had some legendary playoff games.
Right,
I mean,
but
some
what I'm talking
absolute
about is consistent. But you know what I'm talking about. When the basketball is, you always got one big man or whatever it is, Jabbar, Magic. You got the Shaq, Kobe. You got the LeBron, got his whatever. Even when LeBron won it in the bubble, Anthony Davis. You got another guy.
Kawhi didn't have another guy
on that level
when they won it with Toronto. He didn't.
Only one, right? When he was with Toronto, he was the only one. But when he was with San Antonio, they had plenty all the time. That's
well, he was.
the majority of the
obviously
time,
yes.
Yeah, but the majority of the time you have that. Denver, he's been there all this time, and they haven't really, truly ever got him any help at all. So,
Aaron Gordon's help and Jamal Murray's help. That it was good enough to win a title, and Jamal Murray's had multiple 50-point-plus playoff games. He was horrendous in this series, but I give Minnesota a lot of credit for it. It wasn't like he wasn't trying to score. The defense was hellacious. But Murray's been, that number 2 and the guy that can, on nights in the postseason, carry Denver with his scoring and his offense, and he couldn't do it in this series. You're right, though. He needs more help.
He needs more help. He always needed more help.
Yeah. Well, LeBron didn't have – look, I'm not LeBron's not anywhere near my all-time favorite, but some of the teams, even going back to the first stint in Cleveland that won 60-plus games and advanced to conference finals, they didn't have a whole hell of a lot.
Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love.
Yeah, I understand that when they won it, but the year that they didn't win it, Love was hurt, and I just gave you the list of the players that were on that team as they went through the East and actually were in that series in 16 against Golden State. That was Golden State's first title. That was a 4-2 series where LeBron was insane. I'm just saying, I watched every game from this series. Jokic wasn't good enough. As a true all-time superstar, he did not do enough. You're right. Last night, especially, not enough help. And the loss of Aaron Gordon, critical in this series. But against a team that depleted, he should have had 40 and 20. And he didn't. And there was an opportunity for him to have 40 and 20. He could have easily had 16, 17 rebounds. I mean, they gave up 19 offensive rebounds, and he was the culprit on half of them. I'm the biggest Joker fan, and I was disappointed with his series. And the numbers won't say that, but if you watched him, he needed to be better. He's been capable of being better, and he wasn't. And that's why they're going home around early, because I don't know if they would have beaten San Antonio. I'm just kind of upset, TC. I really wanted to see that series. I really wanted to see San Antonio, Denver.
But I realized,
yeah.
I realized that they don't have enough horses. And if he was going to get Gobert,
Minnesota didn't have enough horses last night or the night or over the final 2.5 games. That's the point.
I know that.
Yeah.
But Minnesota has a lot more younger and taller person and lean. They got more defensive players, whereas Denver doesn't have that much defensive guys.
Yeah. Well, you're
talking about Minnesota, but Minnesota got defensive guys.
I've talked about that here this morning and throughout this series. Yeah. I agree, but here's the thing. It doesn't matter that we both know that Minnesota's got some tough, badass defenders that were playing last night. Jaden McDaniels is actually a star right now that nobody knows of because they don't watch enough unless you're really into the NBA. But they didn't have Anthony Edwards, Dante DiVincenzo, and DeSumo, who was their leading scorer in this series. When that's a game, I'm sorry, it is a game with or without a lot of help. The all-time greats ensure that you're playing a game 7. You don't lose that game. Joker needed to go for 40 and 20, and it was there for the taking. And G and I talked about this last hour. He needed to take that game over even more so in the second half as a scorer, and he didn't. And I know he had most of his points in the second half. He should have had more.
One last question.
Yeah, quickly.
One last question. If both of them had their full weapons, all of them, who do you think would have won the game?
Minnesota. After watching that series, they were just tougher.
No, I thought Minnesota was going to win it before the series.
Okay.
They was both in.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be an
Minnesota
incredibly
still gonna
tough
win.
series for Denver to get by. But if both teams are healthy, start to finish, after watching what I watched, and you said something at the beginning of the call, and I do have to run now, TC, but you said younger. Denver looked old and tired last night. The Joker looked old and tired in this series. That's what's concerning to me more than anything else, because what's he's staring at is Wemby and SGA and OKC to try to climb over to get back to an NBA Finals and win another title. And it seems to me that those odds are bleak unless the other teams get injured and his doesn't. They either have to add players for him to compete at that level, or he's going to have to go somewhere else. That would be the interesting thing, because he just doesn't strike me as I'm leaving Denver to go join a better team. But contractually, the opportunity's coming up for him. All right, when we come back, what Dan Quinn said about Sonny Styles and what a team exec on the condition of anonymity said about Sonny Styles. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
So let's walk everybody through Thursday night. A week ago from right now, you were on the clock, 7th overall. Sonny Styles is there. Was that just to rip the knob off? That was it? Don't have to wait any time?
It was cool, like just the way it felt. Like, man, there's going to be an excellent player, and I'm sure you guys had kind of felt the same thing into that space. When Kansas City traded above, I didn't know. Honestly, said, "Oh man, here we go." And so when that took place, and knowing that we were going to add him to the group, man, that was awesome. He had such an impact at Ohio State, and even on his visit here, it was so strong, Rich, how much he loves it, the traits, what he looks, like playing the game and where we think he can go to. Man, we're really pumped about it.
Well, I mean,
Dan Quinn on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, talking about Sonny Styles. I think there was a list of players that were definitely in play for Washington. I do think that there was absolute interest in Jeremiah Love. I do think there was interest in Mansour Delane. I do think there was interest in Caleb Downs, and I do think there was interest in Sonny Styles. And they were certainly hoping that one of those 4 players would fall to them at 7. I'm not so sure about Carnell Tate at 7, but if all the others had been gone, maybe. They got a player that was very, very high on their list, no doubt. And he's going to be a really good player. So Mike Sando from The Athletic does this thing every year where he post-draft goes around and talks to a lot of NFL, executives, front office executives on the condition of anonymity to get thoughts about, other teams and their draft picks and their drafts. And about Washington's selection of Sonny Styles, one front office exec said, quote, "He is Bobby Wagner, but bigger and faster. He has as good of traits for an inside backer that I have ever seen," closed quote. In terms of other comps, one other front office exec said, Brian Urlacher, maybe. He's 6'5", 240 pounds, going to run 4.4, really smart, makes all the calls, very instinctive, and has some untapped pass rush ability. He was top 5 on our board all the way. Now, Sando also writes what I believe to absolutely be true, and that is that, quote, "The Commanders, like so many teams, would have loved to have traded back to acquire more picks. Finding teams interested in trading up was apparently difficult. Washington actually made no trades during the draft. As a result, they didn't address a clear need at receiver until the 3rd round when they made Antonio Williams the 9th wideout selected in the draft. On Antonio Williams, one front office exec said, quote, "Slot guy, solid guy, 40 time is way faster than play speed." That was Steve Suter's film breakdown of Antonio Williams. He said that the 4.4 time that he ran, the 4.41 that he ran at the combine, he said, you don't see that on tape. You don't see that show up. Now, Suter likes the player, said he gets really good separation. He comes out of breaks, doesn't slow down, creates even more, has good hands, good. He said right from the jump, Williams is their best yards after catch receiver on the team. But he said the 4.41 speed does not show up on tape. And that's what another front office exec said. Slot guy, solid guy, 40 time is way faster than play speed, but he is fast and he can probably play a little bit outside. Solid pick. They need a bigger player, more size. Everyone seems to think they'll get Ayuk. Maybe they can get him at the right time when he's motivated for a new contract, closed quote. So there you go. Some other team execs on Washington's top 2 picks. Bobby Wagner, but bigger and faster. Good, as good a traits for an inside backer that particular front office exec has ever seen. I don't see the Urlacher comp. I don't see that comp. I loved Brian Urlacher as a player, but Styles seems more rangy, more athletic, longer. To to me. I'm not saying that he's going to be Brian Urlacher. That would be awesome. But I don't see the stylistic comp. But anyway, there was one other team in the NFC that I read, because I read through all of the front office exec comments about all of the teams in the NFC and their drafts. And Tampa Bay was interesting to me in terms of what they did, because I loved Reuben Bain Jr. And I don't think his short arms are going to be a problem at the NFL level, but that's why he dropped to 15 overall instead of being taken in the top 5 or the top 6 or 7. You know, that's the one player that was on the board at 7 that I would have preferred, but, you know, it's the draft. We don't know anything. I like Styles. I like him a lot. But on the Tampa Bay draft in general, and they got some players, a lot of players that we talked about before the draft. They got Reuben Bain Jr. in the first round. They got Josiah Trotter in the second round, the linebacker from Missouri. They got that Georgia State receiver in the third round. And they got a corner who I loved going into this draft, Keontae Scott from Miami. Miami just had so many good defensive players. Bain, Mesidor, Scott. I mean, that team was really loaded this year. And it showed up. They got to the championship game. But about Reuben Bain's short arms, one front office exec said, quote, "If you watch Bain play, you notice he doesn't use his arms a lot. He uses his head. We overthink these things. He's a really good player." And then about the short arms, another exec said, quote, "The public narrative was that he has short arms, and that always fails. A lot of teams won't take the heat for that. They think that's risky. They don't go with what they saw on tape. They're worried about the analytics crowd and some of the numbers people killing them," closed quote. Man, I hope that's not true for our team. Like, I hope that, you know, they're not saying, good God, this guy is an absolute monster on tape. Yes, but, Adam, his short arms are a real problem. And we've got all this data from 20 years of short arm defensive ends, and nobody's been taken with short arms like that in the first. And we go through that. And this is one front office exec saying sometimes that kind of a thing worries the decision makers, answering to the numbers and the analytics crowd, and afraid that that ultimately could be a thing. And if it is a thing, they're going to pay for it instead of just watching him play. You know, there was some conversation about, you know, some character issues also with Bain in terms of that car crash that he was in that actually killed a passenger tragically. We'll see. I mean, that's the best part of this thing, is you get to look back 3, 4, 5 years down the road and see who was right and who was wrong on some of these calls. But the short arms thing, make no mistake, that's why he fell more than anything else. Because, as I said last week in going into the draft, I think other than Mendoza, he was the best player in college football. I thought he was pound for pound the best player in college football last year, with clear skills that project to the NFL level, with the exception of shorter arms. We'll see what happens with Reuben Bain. But, man, I love that team, Tampa, with what they've added overall. And, look, this is a big year for Todd Bowles. You know, he's a very good defensive head coach, a very good defensive coach in general. You know, they've got a team, man. Like, the idea of Vea and Bain next to each other on that D line, with Winfield Jr. coming back and some of the other pieces they have. And look, offensively, Baker Mayfield, you know, a little bit of a step back year. They just never seem to kind of get over the hump. Too many mistakes, too many lost players. But they added, you know, this kid Hurst to a group that's got Igbukah and Jalen McMillan and Chris Godwin. Of course, they lost Mike Evans to San Francisco. Bucky Irving needs to be healthy for them. You know, they got a back that they brought back, Sean Tucker. They let Rachaad White go, and they kept Sean Tucker. I think Tucker is good. And they added Gainwell from Pittsburgh, who I can tell you, Aaron Rodgers kept talking about all year long is this guy's one of the most underrated players in the league. He was good in Philadelphia. We know that. So here we are, a week after the draft. And we're contemplating a week later some of the things that, execs are saying behind the scenes and what the head coach himself is saying, because he had more on Sonny Styles. Dan Quinn on the Rich Eisen show yesterday talking about sort of how he'll get played defensively in his rookie year.
Say I'm a developmental coach. I can't wait to get started on coaching him. Can you pull back some of the layers for the
Sure.
fans here? Like, what do you mean by that? What will you do? Like, when you see this kid, you will do what?
He has such unique traits to him. And so we'll play a lot of zone where we'll have vision to the QB, and you can imagine this type of speed, this type of length to be able to close to the ball. Although he hasn't blitzed a ton at Ohio State, Reese was there as well. And so the fact that we're going to also send this guy as a blitzer. So I think it's that kind of versatility, where we'll align him, how we can do that. He's got the football acumen because of his time at safety, that the coverage part of his game is intact. And so to see him unleashed in some new ways, that's going to be something that, I very much look forward to being a part of.
Do you possibly green dot him? Do you green dot him?
In the practice, we'll certainly consider that. And a number of guys will have it during the practice times, but he is definitely capable of that. And it's one of the nice things now with the guys already doing that in college, Rich, that in the old days, we'd wait. Does he have the leadership? Does he have that space? And so for him, he's the type of player that can certainly handle that.
The green dot, for those of you who don't know, and most of you do, is just the player that has the green dot on his helmet, which signifies he's the player that has the mic in his helmet, and he's communicating with the play caller, the defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator, a Bobby Wagner position. One of the things Quinn said last week is he kind of referred to Sonny Styles as an old soul, and that he comes in super mature. And if he ends up being that guy, and they didn't have that guy. I mean, it could have been Jordan McGee. It could have been Will Harris. It could have been, Leo Chenal. It could have been one of those, but that's the right spot for it. That's the right guy if he's capable of doing it as a young player. I think one of the things that Quinn said that Adam Peters also said, so, just trying to dig a little deep into knowing what they were, saying and how much of an emphasis should be put on what they said. The emphasis for me is on him as a pass rusher. That's something that they believe he's going to be very good at, and that he'll be good at immediately. Younger players turn them loose. It's a lot easier typically than learning how to play coverages from that spot. But he is, as Suter said, I mean, this will be a completely different situation at linebacker for this team than it was last year, because they've got a guy that can cover man, but as Quinn said, eyes on quarterback in zone, where he's able to really move and be rangy, use that size, use that long arm ability to really be disruptive as a zone coverage guy. Look, they got to get better pass rush. They've got to be better at stopping the run. It starts with stopping the run always. And I think that is the thing to focus on early in his career, is at the NFL level, is he able to take on, guards and centers that are coming towards him? Or is he able to shed those and make tackles? Obviously, what happens in front of him is a big part of whether or not he'll have success. This is a big year for Deron Payne. Javon Kinlaw to play at the level that he played at last year. Tim Settle, Johnny Newton. They got to be better up front for sure. And that'll make it a lot easier on a rookie linebacker. But, sitting here a week later, I certainly feel like they got a really good player, has a really good chance. You never really know with this draft, but they drafted a player that has extraordinary talent and athleticism, and also is mature and smart. So those kinds of things typically translate into higher floors. And I think the ceiling's high. We talked about this last Friday and, even earlier in the week. The Jamin Davis concern should not be a concern in terms of positional, comparisons. Jamin Davis did not have sort of the football acumen coming into the league that Sonny Styles has. And remember, Jamin Davis was immediately tried in a position that he didn't really play in college. Sonny Styles is going to fit right in to that inside linebacker spot, and certainly can play the mic whenever they have three linebackers on the field. That's going to be interesting to see them in their base 3-4 if that's what it is. The who are the outsides? Who are the insides? I think the insides are pretty easy. It's Styles, it's Chenal, but Luvu can be inside, Luvu can be outside, and I think Styles and Chenal have some of that versatility as well. They should be better on defense, right? Can't be worse.
You'd hope.
A lot of new players. Here's one. I just can hear it coming already. Training camp and whoa. The speed, the youth, the coverage.
Jaden
when they're
Daniels,
not actually
16
playing.
incompletions at practice today.
Yeah. 3 batted balls. They couldn't block Oway. Can we just, during July, late July and August, just put the brakes on some of the hyperbolic talk about what's happening in training camp practices where they're not actually allowed to tackle and they're not keeping score? And in preseason games, can we just acknowledge that these aren't games really that mirror regular season games? I can't wait for the opener whenever that comes, because I do think Settle, Oway, Chenal, Styles, Chason, Cross. I love Cross. He's one of my favorite additions in free agency. Seeing Duran and Kinlaw out there with better talent. I think Luvu's got a shot to have a year like he had 2 years ago. And then Dorrance Armstrong back and Dietrich Wise back. And they got some players. And maybe some we're not even thinking about. Kane Medrano is the kind of a player that actually probably would play in a Brian Flores defense. He's got incredible, anticipation. He's not Van Ginkel. He's not that. But he has that kind of feel for the game. Or he did in college. We didn't get to see it last year. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Grant and Danny's show. Was it yesterday, Max?
Yes, it was.
Joe Shasky, who hosts a radio show out in the Bay Area on 95.7 The Game, was a guest for the guys, and they were talking about, guess who? Brandon Ayuk. Here's what Shasky said.
It's the best question there is. We have interviewed TJ Houshmandzadeh since the whole contract thing before they signed him. That was one of his closest confidants. He works out with him. He's his wide receiver coach. TJ Houshmandzadeh has basically Pontius Pilate in him from the situation. He wants nothing to do with Brandon Ayuk. The rumor is the agent dropped him. The agent just dropped Brandon Ayuk. You tell me why that is. I don't know. I mean, if you still think you can make a lot of money off somebody, no matter how, maybe outside the box they might be mentally, you're going to stick with them. This is an unknown thing. How anyone could have a feel for this is beyond me. But I do know this. Those that were closest to him have distanced themselves from him. Does that mean that he does have a story? He might have a story. I want to hear it.
Yeah, so his agent, it's Athletes First. That's the Mulugeta guy and Todd France and some of those guys from that agency. One of the big agencies handling a lot of big-time NFL players. I don't know if we've heard that anywhere else, but Joe Shasky, sports talk show host in the Bay Area, saying that he basically has been left by his agent. And yeah, he's right, by the way. The agents stick with these players, especially when big contracts are a possibility. But, we have heard that in recent weeks, he's essentially not reachable. You can't, sign him until you've reached him. Clearly, again, really clear on this. I love the player from 2023. That's the one I'm interested in. I'm not interested in somebody who has mental issues and is physically not fit. No. And even if he is physically fit and psychologically well, I still only want him on a prove-it deal. That's why you don't trade for him and you don't trade for that contract. You wait for the 49ers to release him. But Shasky also said 50-50 chance he might even not play football anymore. Yeah, right now nobody knows. The only thing we know is that the 49ers have zero interest in having him back. And as of today, don't have much interest in helping him or helping another team, with him. And I've said this a few times this week, maybe going back to last week. If I'm a 49ers fan and this is what happened, I'd say keep him until you can't keep him anymore. And that date, according to some of the reporting out there, would be August 31st, because September 1st is their next payment per his current contract. Why would they cut him until you've exhausted all trade possibilities, which can't be completely exhausted until teams have gone to camp, played preseason games, and then, you could get a desperate team after having players injured that say, yeah, we'll just cut you, a sixth rounder and we want a seventh rounder back. They'll do anything. And they don't have to. Now, if he shows up for off-season activities and he's a disruption, would they move on from him? I think Nikki Javala and Matt Barrows from The Athletic wrote in their column, maybe the best thing for anybody interested in Brandon Ayuk is for him to do what he hasn't done for the last year and a half, and that is show up for work. Because if he shows up, maybe it'll be a big enough distraction where the 49ers just say, nobody's trading for this guy. Let's just get rid of him. But if he's out of sight, out of mind, what's the reason that they would, they don't want to be asked about him anymore? No, that's not going to happen. They seem to relish being able to say to the media, yeah, we're not cutting him, but we are interested in trading him. We're interested in getting something back for him. So we'll see whether or not that happens. I think the heavy odds are that no one trades for him, because you only want that guy walking into your building with no draft compensation and on a one-year prove-it deal. And then I don't know the mechanics of how an Adam Peters goes about making sure that before they waste any time. And by the way, wasting time includes not moving on somebody else because you're waiting on this. The sooner the better they get the information on, is he healthy physically? Is he fit mentally? I know so many of you are just rolling your eyes saying, why would you ever introduce this into the locker room? Well, this may not be what we think it is. This could just be a terrible relationship that, he was not a problem before the first contract negotiation and then the injury. I mean, there were a couple of things, certainly maturity-wise, over that summer of 2024 during the contract negotiation. I absolutely am interested, but again, only on the, basis of 1 year prove-it deal, and you have done your due diligence to know that he's physically fit and you're not bringing a wingnut into your building. Some of you think that ship's already sailed. It's already obvious that this guy is not well. His judgment certainly is poor and immature, but we don't know the reasons why he felt the way he felt. There could be a story in there somewhere. Remember, it was Kyle's dad who did the conditioning test for Albert Hainsworth, but it turned out that they got a draft pick for Albert Hainsworth. They didn't turn Donovan McNabb loose when everybody wanted Donovan McNabb to be turned loose. They got a 6th rounder for McNabb. That became Alfred Morris. So I don't think the 49ers are going to budge unless it just becomes some sort of absolute out of control free-for-all if he shows up to offseason activities. So the draft ratings from last week were actually down from previous years. It averaged 6.6 million viewers over the 3 days. That's a double-digit loss percentage-wise from where they've been recently. By the way, still 6.6 million viewers tops everything but football as an average number. And remember, it was on ABC, it was on ESPN, it was on the NFL Network, it was on, so many different outlets over last weekend. The reason has to be that this was a draft that just didn't have superstar quarterbacks at the top of it. When you have a lot of superstar, well-known quarterbacks that are first-round projections, the draft gets more attention. This draft had one, and nobody saw Ty Simpson going 13. And then it had a bunch of players that are good and maybe great, we'll see, but it was a starless draft at the top. And the ratings reflected it. Still, I want to point out that 6.6 million average viewers is better than the average for the NBA Finals last year. Now, that was Oklahoma City, Indiana. But still, and, blows away the Stanley Cup Finals or anything else. But major drop in percentage of viewers for the draft. And again, there was not, a big storyline. There wasn't a big, named player after Mendoza, and there wasn't any drama with a big name player dropping and, the green room stuff. I mean, Bain dropped, but it wasn't a big story as it was happening. Ben Standing will join us next. Ben Standig is with us like he is every Friday and Monday at 12 noon, sometimes in between. He is reachable on X at Ben Standig, and he, of course, writes prolifically on his Substack called Last Man Standing. So let's just get the Brandon Ayuk stuff out of the way because it is getting to be a little bit nauseating, although I don't think in the same way that the Terry conversation did, because this is a big mystery and it's a potential game changer if they actually got the guy from 3 years ago. But I just played a soundbite from a sports talk show host from San Francisco that appeared with Grant and Danny yesterday saying that his agent has left him. I know you know a lot of people in that agency, with Mulugeta, et cetera. Have you heard the same thing? Is he AWOL right now where people are leaving him left and right?
So I wrote in the story I had this week, sort of a post-draft notebook and focused on Ayuk. And I said in there that I had one GM tell me that as far as he knows, like nobody's been able to talk to him, and that includes the agents. I tried to reach out to the agent, did not hear back. Now I've not seen that the agent moved on from Ayuk, but that would be hardly surprising if, obviously if you can't talk to your client, if he's not willing to, play ball, not to mention, as much as we've said, it's an insane look that Brandon Ayuk blew up a 4-year, $120 million deal. Well, if you're the agent, that's, that's not going to fly. So I can totally imagine that happening. I will look into that after we get off to see if I can tell that's actually accurate, but I presume it is.
Do you think there's a cutoff date for Adam Peters and company to say if it happens by this date, we'll move forward with it, or we'll proceed with the possibility of moving forward with it? And if it goes past that date, we're done.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the Terry thing, right? Obviously, he missed all of, OTAs and minicamp and training camp. At least he'd already been in the offense, right? So at a minimum, he at least had, the working knowledge of it. Ayuk, I mean, whatever. He played with Jaden Daniels 7 years ago in college. That's not the same thing. He needs to get here, whether he's Brandon Ayuk or an undrafted free agent. He's got to get here to, learn the book, so learn the playbook, learn who everybody is, all that. So, I don't know if that means by veteran minicamp, probably not. By training camp, I mean, San Francisco doesn't have to do anything really until the start of the season. So you would think at some point in training camp, it'd be like, hey, we got to move on here, right? I mean, part of what I wrote the other day was everybody seems insistent that he's coming here, right? And yet simultaneously, everybody acknowledges that Brandon Ayuk is not talking to anybody. So how do these things square? How do we know what actually is going on in his head? He's giving no indication based on anything we have seen that he is training for football. He has not played in a game since 2004 following the knee injury. It was said that he was working hard in his rehab when he was with the Niners up until the point he stepped away. Maybe I presume he's healthy at this point, but I don't know what he's doing. And it's the weirdest part of this whole thing that everybody just keeps presuming he's coming here, yet based on what? If Brandon Ayuk is not actually talking, that seems like an important person to have any sense of what they're up to before assessing the Washington they're coming here. So I don't know where Washington's at, but you would have to think not only do they need a plan B, if he does come here, they may need a plan B if he's not going to come here.
Yeah, so that's where I wanted to go next, Plan B. Plan B, let's start with this. Plan B is not essentially the status quo in terms of the receivers that are currently on the roster. You don't think that that's Plan B. That might be Plan C, but that's not Plan B, right?
Wait, say it again. What is Plan B in your head?
Plan B isn't they're good. They're not adding anybody else. That might be Plan C, but Plan B is another player added to this wide receiver room.
I don't know. I mean, like, if it's a player like a Jawan Jennings or a Stephon Diggs, somebody who's, especially Diggs is obviously shown to be one of the better receivers in the league, but there's off the field issues with him that, partly why he's still available. That would be notable. But if you're just saying, hey, they need another person in the De'Ami Brown, Traylon Burks level, like, I don't know that necessarily matters.
I'm with you on that. I mean, I don't think they're going to re-sign Noah Brown, and bring him back.
Right.
But so what is plan B? Is it Juwan Jennings? You reported on that the other day. I mentioned what you had reported. You had a source share with you that Washington has been in communication with Jennings' camp. It's very possible that, it's just contact. We're interested if, the money comes down or whatever. Give us sum up that report that you had and whether or not Jennings is an actual real possibility at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's been weird that, again, Ayuk is getting connected here. It's not just Adam Peters. You have the Jaden Daniels component too, but Peters also drafted Jennings, so how come that one's not getting mentioned, right? Debo came here. Ayuk, everybody thinks is coming here, so why not Jennings? And yet he's still out there, even if it's just, apparently he saw too much money according to, what the league was looking to pay him, and it's partly why he's still out there. But a lot of teams need receivers, and he's still out there. Supposedly he met with the Vikings this week. I've not seen or heard of any type of, resolution on that. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see anything there. He certainly wasn't signed. So what is going on there? He's a little bit of an older receiver. I mean, he's not 30, God forbid, but he's not 24 either. And there's a reason why he's not out there, and it's not just the money. So I don't really know that he is. The Niners aren't even looking to bring him back, and he was pretty valuable for them the last 2 years. So I don't know what's going on with that. So I can't sit here and say that's Plan B as if that's the fallback. Diggs, I mean, again, his off the field stuff to me would seemingly preclude him from being at a place that preaches culture. Of course, if they're going to bring in Brandon Ayuk, then I don't know what to make of that either. So I don't really know. And then after that, like I said, unless I'm forgetting somebody, I don't know if there's much difference in what they already have. So I don't know that there's really a plan B per se, because otherwise, to your point, why wouldn't you kind of get moving here? Let's put Ayuk aside. If there's somebody else that you would want, wouldn't you want them here for any time that Jaden Daniels is practicing? I would think so. So if something doesn't happen sooner than later, I don't know if there really is a plan B in terms of the higher end guy.
Is there any chance that Deebo Samuel comes back?
I mean, I guess there's always a chance, but it just seems unlikely to me. I mean, the biggest issue with Deebo is he can't play on the outside. He's not a traditional receiver, and that's what they need, which is why I think the Antonio Williams pick was sort of not caught me off guard a little bit, but he was primarily a slot in college. And, I know Peters has said he can win on the outside. I've talked to other people around the league who have said similar things. So if that's accurate, then maybe they have a guy that can at least play there somewhat. But, Deebo is a guy who's primarily going to play on the inside. That would mean Williams would now be playing almost majority on the outside. That can't be the plan. So I would think the answer would be no. But, in a beggars can't be choosers situation, I guess anything's possible. But I would still see that to be pretty unlikely.
Is Terry McLaurin going to be happy going into this potential final year in Washington? I know the contract says there's more time after this year, but Washington can get out of it painless after this year. I always kind of felt last year that it was an unhappy Terry that eventually arrived with that, extension that looked great from his agent's standpoint, but really wasn't that impressive. What do you think of his overall sort of, this is a big year for him. If he wants to get paid next year, either by this team with the current extension or by somebody else coming off an injury season, which is essentially what their analytics people predicted and why they didn't want to pay him too much. What do you think of Terry McLaurin entering this season? We just assume he'll be great and that he's happy.
Yeah, I mean, the happy part, it's hard to say what's inside somebody's head. I mean, the team did put out photos or video or photos yesterday of him at the facility working out. So, it's a positive sign, at least, that, he's there, as many other guys are. Terry is, generally speaking, a pretty professional guy. Obviously, last year was a bit weird because of the, some of the acrimony that comes with the contract negotiation. But, hey, he's still going to get paid some good money this year. And, presumably, if he has another good year, then whether it's here or somewhere else, he would still get, a pretty good payday. I mean, to me, look, obviously the offense was a total disaster last year with all the injuries and whatnot. But I thought when Terry did play, particularly after the injury, when he came back, that he was still pretty good. Like that he was a pretty good. Extrapolate that over the course of the season, and we'd be saying, okay, that was another good year. So oddly, I think on some level his value showed even more because of how the whole season went, with the passing game just falling apart after his injury and Noah Brown's injury. So, again, what's in his heart of hearts, I don't know. I'm sure he would love to, he's built his life here, and it's not just football. He's, married and, seems like he wants to be here and, to continue this chapter of his life. But obviously that may not be the case. So I would imagine he's going to be in good spirits and do what he has to do. But, beyond that, I've heard nothing about contract talks or anything. I can't imagine anybody's talking about that right now. So, I would think he's in a good spot, but obviously it's got to be weird knowing that, hey, this could be your last year.
Talking to Ben Standig, the story that you put out today has a stat in there that I had not seen, and I want you to explain it and talk about it, and that is the snap to tackle defensive stat from True Media and how they tried to address that. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, obviously, the getting younger, getting faster has been a clear approach for them this offseason. And, seemingly, especially on defense, they've done a good job of that at all three levels. And I was trying to figure out, is there a way to see, who is the fastest or the slowest team? And it's not, you can't really do it. At least I couldn't find a way to do it based on 40 times or things like that. But there was a stat that showed that how quick a team is or how slow a team is from the snap to the whistle in terms of getting a tackle. And Washington was about 5.1 seconds, which was
it's amazing.
The third slowest in the league. Dallas and Cincinnati were the only worst ones. So yeah, I mean, obviously, without knowing what any individual play is, it says, hey, it wasn't quick. Whether it was a run, whether it was a pass, what have you, they weren't ending that play quickly. And that's definitely a part of the speed factor. We saw too many guys, running free last year, or just the inability to make tackles at times, what have you. And again, just because you're fast doesn't mean you're going to be able to bring a guy down. But between Owe, Chenal, Sonny Styles, Nick Cross, even guys like Meek Robertson, all those guys run, sub 4.540, if not faster, if not a sub 440 in some cases. So, they definitely have gotten faster, and hopefully that's going to translate to just simply, ending plays quicker. Hopefully more turnovers, keeping teams out of the end zone, all that. But at a base level, if it means, a play ends quicker, that should bode well. And I think that's definitely, a big, whether that specific number or not mattered to them, some version of that had to be on their mind as they decided, hey, we got to invest in getting more athletic, faster, et cetera, especially on defense.
5.1 seconds from snap of football to actually the whistle blowing with a tackle by the defense. Third worst in the league behind Dallas and Cincinnati. All right. Just want to finish up with this because you put this list together. I know I've already asked you about Deebo Samuel, but you put a list together the other day of all of the players that played here last year that are currently, unrestricted free agents, but didn't sign through these first few waves of free agency. The list is 10, 11, 12 deep, something like that. On this list of players who played on the team last year, who are still currently out there and available, who comes back, if anybody?
Yeah, I think the two names to me, one, Antonio Hamilton, the cornerback. Now, look, I thought he had that Giants win in particular last year. He had some good moments. Now look, he's 32, 33. I'm not remotely saying he's the answer to any of their problems. It's just purely that right now, if you look at the corner room, you've got 4 guys, and then there's a bunch of practice squad type players. So at a minimum, they need more vets, more bodies, one way or the other. And Hamilton, at least for Dan Quinn, it looked like a guy that Quinn was, really appreciative of last year. Whether they see him as a fit now for Durante Jones' system, I don't know. But again, just knowing the guy, based on him being here, I think that would be one. And another one, this one's going to be a little bit off the board here to a degree. I still wonder about Jeff Driscoll coming back. I know they just drafted a quarterback, but so far in the 2 years under Quinn, not only have they kept 3 quarterbacks, everybody except for obviously Jaden Daniels has been some type of veteran. Last year they kept, Josh Johnson over Sam Hartman or anybody else. And, I didn't, you typically look at it and say, well, if you draft a guy, he's going to make the team, right? This is an interesting one because I don't know that, if Washington doesn't draft the Rutgers quarterback, whose name I still can't say exactly, I don't know that he gets drafted. I didn't hear, when I was asking people around the league, nobody was like, oh yeah, that guy was really promising.
I can't believe who he got drafted in front of. I mean, he was drafted in front of Garrett Nussmeier, who this time last year was supposed to be a top 5 pick in the draft. Crazy.
Yeah, very, very, very odd. So, in order, if he were to get cut, that means somebody else would have to pick him up, so he wouldn't be on a practice squad. And again, we're talking about a 7th round pick at any level is not necessarily somebody another team's going to get, let alone a quarterback that most teams are probably going to feel pretty good about their quarterback, right? So I don't know that. I guess my point is, I think it's conceivable he could get cut and be on the practice squad. They move on from Hartman and bring Driscoll in, who not only has been here in parts of the last 2 years, he played with Blau in Detroit. So, he's going to have familiarity. And, I'm not saying that's going to put them over the top, but as we all know, if the S hit the fan and they actually had to go to the 3rd string guy, they're probably going to go out and find somebody else before they use the rookie from Rutgers. So I don't, I don't think it would be crazy to think that Driscoll could be back. He's still out there. They've liked him enough to have him here 2 years in a row in some capacity. So I think that's one to keep an eye on.
All right, before you go, because your passion is football, but it's also basketball, and I saw you tweet out last night, I'm assuming during the Minnesota-Denver game or shortly thereafter, that maybe the Wizards should have kept Tim Connolly when he was here. He's the GM of the Timberwolves. I did calls earlier in the show, and I think you and I have talked about this, but I'm wondering what your answer is to it. Do you think Nikola Jokic's legacy / reputation takes a big hit losing this series with the Timberwolves being so depleted over the final 2.5 games? He has not been past the second round since the title in 23.
Yeah, I think that the nature of the NBA in particular, the stars get the praise and the stars get the blame when things go wrong. So that kind of comes with the territory. Now, if you look at it closer, I would say that Denver's ownership group, the Nuggets ownership group, is absolutely shameful. Like Stan Kroenke owns all these different teams. He built the SoFi Stadium. He's got crazy, they all have crazy money, but he's got crazy money, and he has been unbelievably cheap with the Nuggets. Like the infrastructure, they're pretty thin in numerous ways compared to other teams. But just in terms of the roster, the year they won the title, they were fortunate they found a guy like Bruce Brown, who was sort of a random guy who turned into a legit top 6-7 player in the rotation. And that's how they've had to deal all this. That's how they've had to work. They're always working 1 or 2 players short, it feels like. So basically, if they don't hit on a draft pick, or if whatever move they make in free agency or something doesn't completely hit, there's no plan B. Even this, they traded Michael Porter this past offseason. I was completely fine with that. I think Michael Porter,
he played poorly. Yes.
You can't rely on him at all in the playoffs. But he gave them good size and athleticism. Okay, cool. But then they don't replace it. So Aaron Gordon, who is the best athlete on their team by far, is hurt, they don't have a plan B to just simply have another forward who's agile, can defend inside, whatever. And Jokic is obviously, as great as he is, he's not the most agile guy. So, yes, Jokic is going to get the blame. But to me, it's pretty easy to look at that organization, and it's really, on them. I mean, even in the game last night, Jokic could have had like a 5 or 6 extra assists in the fourth quarter alone if all the open threes and layups he was creating with passes were converted, and like none of them were in the last 5 minutes. So he'll get the blame because that's how it goes. But to me, it's much more of an organizational issue than a him issue.
Well, that's fair in terms of the big picture of them competing for a title this year. But they played a completely depleted team last night. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm so impressed with Jaden McDaniels. I was so impressed with Clark's defense last night. That is a tough, rugged, gritty, well-coached basketball team. But Jokic also should have ended up with 17 or 18 rebounds in this game. I mean, he gave up multiple offensive rebounds that should have been defensive rebounds, gave up multiple at the rim dunks and easy layups. And I thought, and I'm a big Joker guy, I thought last night, once Murray, and who, by the way, was terrible in this series, terrible last night, but I give Minnesota a lot of credit for his lack of productivity. I mean, the defense on him was suffocating throughout. But I just thought there were so many opportunities for Jokic to actually score more. He did defer, to your point. He could have had 4 or 5 more assists just in the fourth quarter alone. There were open looks for Murray that he created. There was an open look for Christian Braun. There were open. Cam Johnson knocked down some of them. But I think in a game like that, he had an opportunity to go get 36 to 40 and probably 15 to 20 rebounds, and he didn't, to get by a team that was completely depleted. And that's the part that's tough for me to handle. He looked old last night, too. He looked old in this series. He looked old and tired. And I think we've gone from 3 years ago, this guy's going to win more of these, and he's going to go down as one of the greatest to ever play. And I'm never going to forget that this is the best passing big man I've ever watched and one of the great offensive centers in the history of the game. But this sport is measured on championships, and he's probably not going to go back to one unless he ends up somewhere else, which could happen. I mean, I don't know how much talk there has been about that, but he's got the same kind of Anthony Davis situation, $58 million next year and then a player option the following year. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would demand it. But I thought he could have done more. I admit that no Aaron Gordon was crushing for them, but no Anthony Edwards was worse for Minnesota.
Well, again, I mean, I think it's a matter of depth. I mean, in this sport where one player makes all the difference, it is hard to just say, well, put the onus on somebody else. And I'm with you. I don't think it was his best series. I do think he looked a bit older. I mean, I do think that, it's funny that Tim Connolly, who, was the architect for the Nuggets, he then goes to Minnesota, makes the big trade for Rudy Gobert. And part of why you think he was doing that was because Rudy Gobert would be a bit of a hindrance against Nikola Jokic. And to some degree, I mean, look, Jokic still put up pretty big numbers all series, but when you have a guy like Gobert whose primary asset is defense, it's just going to make it that much harder. And then when Jamal Murray is atrocious, Christian Braun the last 4 games was abysmal. They don't have Gordon. They have the bench is pretty thin. They have no other bigs. Like, again, I'm not saying it's on Jokic, but it literally comes down to the one guy has to get 35, 20, and 10 every game. I mean, at some point, that just can't be realistic. You actually have to have the other people do something. I mean, look, we see it all the time, right? Paxson and Kerr made shots with Jordan. Ray Allen hits the 3 for LeBron. Like, it isn't just the one guy. It is all the –
No, and it's been Murray for them. It's been Murray and Gordon. And by the way, Porter a few years ago was a really good feet set open shooter, off of a lot of what Jokic created. But the numbers for Jokic in this series, 25-8, 25.8 points per game, 13.2 rebounds, and nearly 10 assists. It's just, it doesn't tell the story. He had a couple of horrific games. I mean, he shot 44% from the field and 19% from behind the arc. If he had just shot 30% or 28% from behind the arc, we're in a seventh game at the very least. I mean, he was terrible from behind the arc in this series. A lot of them were open shots, too, that just didn't go down.
Yeah, so to connect this to the Commanders, this is not necessarily an
you don't need to do that.
No, it's just where my brain went.
Okay.
What the injuries last year for the Commanders, that's not why they lost the season, other than you could say Jaden Daniels, but like it was because the injuries exposed they had no depth. I mean, you can't just lose Terry McLaurin and then have no passing game. Like there was nothing behind it. That's kind of where Denver is. If Jokic doesn't go for 35, 20, and 12 a night, their other guys didn't step up at all. Jamal Murray is the most inconsistent. I wouldn't say he's a superstar, but he's the most inconsistent star in the.
He's been clutch in the postseason though before this year.
At times, but at times he completely when they have lost, it's often because he's vanished. That's why Michael Porter was the same way. And again, they just don't have the bodies. I mean, to Minnesota's credit, how many teams could lose all the guys that they lost?
It's amazing.
And still have all these other dudes who can step up and score 25 points. That is not normal. And again, kudos to Minnesota's, Tim Connolly, the guy who helped put that roster together. They got athletes all over the place and guys who have a certain mentality that they are unafraid of the moment. And I think it's a lot of credit to Anthony Edwards as well for helping to set that tone. But, look, I think, if you're going to say like Denver's a bit soft, you could put up some of that on Jokic. I think that's reasonably fair.
That is fair. He is hardly a rim protector. That is fair.
Right. Yeah. But that's, again, why you have an Aaron Gordon. That's why you need to have another athletic guy next to him. So, again, to me, this is more of a failure of management than it is him. But, again, this is why for years I've been railing here against Leonsis, and everybody would always blame Ernie Grunfeld. I'm like, no, he's the guy that employs that guy. He's the one saying, no, I want this guy in here, or Tommy Shepard or whoever it was. And then he's saying to them, hey, you need to actually get to the 8th seed. We can't, it took forever for him to accept the fact that they needed to do what they've done the last 3 years and essentially tank. And it looks like they're coming out of it pretty reasonable on the other side. Denver's ownership is basically saying, yeah, we're not going to give you too many assets. Yeah, we may have the best player in the league. Go ahead. Here's what you got. And that is just an absolute disgrace to have that level of player and not, I don't know, that luxury tax or whatever, but just like they clearly did not go all in when they've had this guy that they should go all in on. And I think this is an example of where that bites them because you have one injury. Yeah. Well, they've had multiple injuries. You have an injury and then Jokic is not the best version of himself and they lose.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it's also true he wasn't his best version of himself. And we have seen teams without a lot around a superstar, and the superstar carries the team past a situation like this. I mean, go back to 2019. It's not like Kawhi had in Toronto, stars all around him. He had good role players all around him, but not another star. I mean, we have seen Jamal Murray in the postseason play like a star, score like a star. Didn't do it in this series. And the funny thing is like, you're right. Occasionally he has just had off nights. This was defensive force throughout. I was so impressed with Minnesota's youth. Jaden McDaniels is, a burgeoning star, two-way star, too. And, and Rudy Gobert's sort of been a bit of, the butt of a lot of jokes at times, but he is still a defensive wrecker at the rim. And he really, really gave Jokic a hard time in this series. What are you looking forward to watching the most? Do you here's a question. Do you think the Knicks have a better shot against the Celtics or the Sixers?
I mean, probably the Sixers, just because it's, is Joel Embiid going to be able to stay on the court, throughout the series? That's obviously such a massive what if. If you told me he was, I mean, Embiid is incredible. He just unfortunately has not been able to stay healthy. The Celtics, they don't have much of a big man situation inside, and some of their role players have not been playing as well. Jaylen Brown has not been the same version we've seen in the regular season, et cetera. So I would still say the Celtics would be the tougher team to face. But again, if you tell me Embiid's playing at least 6 games in the series, then I think that would be pretty fun. To me, I think the most fascinating what we have today now is the Rockets going up against the Lakers. Not only do the Rockets have a chance to tie this thing at 3 after being down 3-0, meaning they could be the first team ever to come back from a 3-0 deficit. They're doing it with Kevin Durant not playing.
Yep.
Kevin Durant's reputation, it's rare to see an all-time great player, like whatever ranking you had him as an all-time best, 15, 12, 20, whatever. It's rare to see that number go down for reasons other than other people passed him. His is going down because of what's happened to him since Golden State and this whole, he seems like he's just blew up that locker room, and now they're playing better without him. But then simultaneously, of course, you've got the Lakers. Yes, they're missing Doncic, but to be up 3-0, and now, boy, they look like they could be into big trouble, and that would be an unbelievable footnote to LeBron's career if he's the guy on the first team that ever loses a 3-0 deficit. And
Durant,
Houston's got the young athletes to do it. So
LeBron, if he blows a 3-0 lead. But going into this series without Doncic and Reeves, it seemed like a foregone conclusion that they wouldn't win this series. The Durant thing really is kind of fascinating because Kevin Durant is not likable, and I'm talking just a normal run-of-the-mill sports fan that's paying attention enough. There's just something unlikable about Kevin Durant. Now, his game is spectacular, and he's going to go down as one of the great scorers in the history of the game. But obviously, he joined a 73-win team to get his titles. He was great on those teams, but Steph Curry was the leader on those teams. I actually think that series he played against Milwaukee and Brooklyn was the best he's ever been in the postseason, where he went for like 48 and 50 in back-to-back games and literally carried them and they were, they were good enough, but they didn't get through that. Remember, his toe was on the 3-point line, and it was a 2-pointer instead of a 3-pointer. But God, the Phoenix time, and now this thing in Houston, he looks grumpy. The team looked like they were done a couple of games ago. And if they come back and win this series with him not making another appearance, it's a bad look. Although, then again, he might play in the next series and, go for 30-something on average. But, yeah, there's something about him that's just never been truly embraceable, I think.
Well, it's something. I mean, it just feels like something flipped after he gives the MVP speech and points to his mom and said, "You're the real MVP." It feels like something from that point on it went a different way. Now he's the guy with all the burners who's constantly yapping back at people on social media. You tell me not to do that. That guy should definitely not be doing that.
He should definitely not be doing that.
Yeah. And, look, I mean, even Phoenix, I know Phoenix bowed out in the playoffs, somewhat meekly, but they had no expectations, and they ended up being, essentially the 7th seed, right?
Yeah.
They part of that was built off of the assets they got back in that deal, but really it was because
teams seem to be better off without him.
Yeah, they just seem to have a better chemistry. So, something is off with that. So anyway, that's why this from a legacy standpoint, this series is so fascinating because depending on which way it goes, could have at least a footnote, if not a big note for Durant and LeBron to a lesser degree, because like you said, they're missing people, but still. It's a pretty fascinating one tonight without question.
I'll tell you what, Sengun's really good, and they don't have a good matchup for him, and he was not good early in the series, and he is good now. They're a 3.5, 4-point favorite tonight. If they win and there's a 7th game in LA, that would be pretty dramatic on Sunday. I hope we get to see it. Thanks. Appreciate it as always.
Always, man. See ya.
Ben Standig, everybody. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Kyle Shanahan was a guest on the Rich Eisen show. We've used the Rich Eisen show from yesterday a couple of times on the show already, but Kyle Shanahan, the head coach of the 49ers, was on with Rich Eisen. Nothing that will be played here about Brandon Ayuk for those of you that are sick of the Brandon Ayuk situation. But there were a couple of interesting thoughts from Kyle that have sort of gone viral. This, first of all, was Kyle talking about his process of preparing for the draft. Here's what he said.
I mean, I feel like I'm just always playing catch up. You know, that's what John and his whole department, they do all year. So they got a really good idea in January when the season ends. They kind of reevaluate it after all the pro days, the combine and everything, but they don't change that much because, you know, we try to base everything off the film, but there's certain things that guys can do that can hurt themselves or help themselves after that. But for me, you know, I pick up that tape for the first time in February. You know, I don't usually know who the Heisman is or anything like that at that time. I've just been 100% NFL ball, and it's hard to catch up with all those guys. So you got to depend on a lot of other people. One way we do it here is, you know, we give all the position coaches, you know, a responsibility to make highlight tapes on everybody. And I tell them, you know, they got to watch a lot of game tape to make those highlight tapes. And then I study their highlight tapes so I can study, you know, 200 people. And I always tell them if I don't like their highlight tape, then I'm not going to watch anything after. So those guys got to put a lot of work into their highlight tape, because if they can impress you with that, I always say, what's the point of watching more? Which I would love to watch more, but that's the way you can get it done in a 2-month time frame. And when you do get it done, I definitely don't want to look at any more college ball until next February. NFL is a little bit more fun for me to watch, a little bit more what I'm used to, and it pertains to what we do. But the draft's everything, so you got to make sure you put all that time into it. But I will say it's hard over 2 months when you got to watch all those guys, and you know you might only get like 4 to 8 guys. And it's not like you got your choice of everybody. So sometimes you watch people, you fall in love with them, and it just breaks your heart, because the more you watch them, you realize this guy's way too good. There's no chance we're going to be able to get this guy in.
The part of the answer there that Kyle gave that's kind of gone viral is, if I don't like their highlight tape, I'm not going to watch anything afterwards. But in context, you kind of understand. It's not his job to be preparing year-round for the NFL draft. It's his job to coach the football team that they have, and that is a 12-month job to begin with. And certainly he's not going to spend time in the middle of the season or towards the end of the season, or certainly during the playoffs, watching college tape. That's John Lynch. That's his team's responsibility to tee that up. But the idea that position coaches have to go through all of those players when the season ends to create highlight tapes, I actually kind of get that. For a guy who comes in late to the process and isn't necessarily going to be the final decision maker on who they take and who they don't take, if your own group has created a highlight tape that isn't impressive, why would you go on after that? But yeah, I mean, that's the draft, though. I mean, the preparation of it for 200, 250, 300 plus players, and you're only going to get 4 to 8 of them at the end of the day. Here's the other part of Kyle's conversation with Rich Eisen yesterday that I read about. I have not heard it. I want to hear it. But they drafted in the second round a running back from Indiana, Kalen Black. Third round, was it the third round? Yeah, but he was the third running back taken in the draft after the 2 Notre Dame players, correct?
Yeah, after Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love.
Yeah, he was not supposed to be the third running back selected in the NFL draft. When you looked at, the consensus boards prior to the draft, after Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price from Notre Dame, guys like Mike Washington from Arkansas and Jonah Coleman from Washington and Nick Singleton from Penn State, Katron Allen even, who went in the 6th round, they were the names most often mentioned. Kalen Black from Indiana was not a guy that was supposed to be, per the consensus boards, the third running back taken. And I say that and emphasize that because John Lynch, and we had Warren Sharp on the show earlier this week, and he really got after John Lynch's process, where John Lynch admitted he doesn't pay attention to the consensus boards. And Warren Sharp's point was, well, that's why you're not getting much value in the picks. You end up taking players ahead of where they're supposed to to go too often. And in the case of Kalen Black, the running back from Indiana, it was way earlier than most people thought. Kyle Shanahan talked about him.
To the combine, although he flashed every single time Indiana was running the ball in winning a national championship. And Kalen Black, why do you like him and take him third on your order here in the third round?
We thought he was and trying to think of the way to word this, but we had him as the second rated back on the board. So, I mean, that's just our evaluation of him, right or wrong. That's our evaluation. And then you got to decide where you think he's going to go. And I think that's the hardest thing with this league. You got a guy who's not invited to the combine. So what does that mean? Man, maybe it means he's going in the 6th round. But then you evaluate him. You're like, man, I think this is a 3rd round running back. But you're like, oh, he's not going to the 6th round because he wasn't invited to the combine. That's what we're guessing. Well, let's put him as a sleeper in the 6th round, which we do with a lot of guys. And that's where, we've had a lot of success on some of those dudes. But then you start to watch the whole draft and you start to watch all the backs and evaluate all the backs together. And this wasn't as deep of a draft as years past for running backs. And when you look at it all and you take a census of scouts, of coaches, it's a whole process, but you start to get to April and the majority of our place is ranking them up there. And it only takes one other team to look at that way. Now, if someone else has them as their second back, you're gambling that they're not going to go up and take them as the second back right away. You think they're going to try to do the same thing. Hey, everyone's going to look at this as a 5th round guy. Let's take him in the 4th. Well, by the time that the draft came, we feel everyone's looking at this guy as a 4th round pick. And so if everyone's looking at him as a 4th round pick, man, if we want him, I'll take him at 90 in the 3rd. We'll be all right. Everyone hating on us and judging that, like, as long as that's what we feel like. And that doesn't mean you're going to be right. And to me, when it's said and done, they all end up about 50-50. But when you sit there and you truly believe he's going to be a 4th round pick for the league and you take him at 90, what's the gamble there?
It's so interesting to hear him talk about that, because that's what teams in Warren Sharp kind of explained this to us earlier this week. Teams are wrestling with this new phenomenon. When I say new, it's 10, 15 years. It's not like the last 3. But these consensus big boards that are out there that teams do pay attention to a certain degree, even though John Lynch said that he doesn't. But they have a sense of what, the people on the outside, not the teams themselves, but the people on the outside are thinking and where they're slotting these players in. And are teams paying attention to it? Do these big boards line up with other teams? And when they don't, with a player like Kalen Black, and you think he's the second best running back after Jeremiah Love in the draft, and you think that, teams have him slotted as a 6th rounder because he didn't even get invited to the Indy Combine, and then all of a sudden you've got him as the second best running back in the draft, and you think he could be a 4th rounder, do you take the chance that somebody else is thinking the same way about him? And what he said was, more times than not, and the answer wasn't complete because I read from the transcript, there was even more about it. He said, there's nothing worse than when you have a player rated much higher than, say, the consensus has the player rated, and this, you have a strong conviction, and then you're trying to get him, a little bit before where the consensus boards are, but another team feels the same way you do, or maybe 2 or 3 teams feel the same way you do, and then he's gone. And people say, oh, terrible, reach. The player got picked in the 3rd round, should have never been picked before the 6th round. But there were other teams that saw something in this player and evaluated him much differently than outside consensus boards evaluated him. There was a player that Washington took. It was Mike Shanahan's 1st draft, 2nd draft. Hold on, I got to go back and find it. It was a defensive tackle from Clemson. And they took him in the 2nd round. And I remember that there was a lot of discussion that most people didn't have this guy any higher than like a 4th round pick. The player was Jarvis Jenkins. Jarvis Jenkins was taken in the 2nd round of the 2011 draft. They selected Ryan Kerrigan first. They traded back, if you recall, with Jacksonville, passed on J.J. Watt. and picked up a second rounder, and they used that to select Jarvis Jenkins from Clemson. And everybody said it was super early. And I remember asking somebody back then about Jarvis Jenkins and why they picked him so early. And they said they loved the player and they knew other teams were very interested, and they did not think that they could get him in the third round. So they picked him maybe a round or two too early, but they felt like the rest of the league was onto it. Now, Jarvis Jenkins didn't amount to much. They took a player in the 2012 draft, the RG3 draft, in the third round, who wasn't even on any consensus boards. Josh Laribus from SMU. Remember that pick in the third round? They picked Cousins, remember, in the fourth round of that draft. And the ESPN and the NFL Network were looking for any sort of information. But Mike said about Laribus, for any team that ran our style of offense, this guy was climbing, in the week or two before the draft. And if they hadn't, Laribus didn't turn out to be much, but apparently if they hadn't taken him there, somebody else would have, even though he was, by all accounts, a player that was 6th, 7th round or later, undrafted free agent. Interesting stuff from Kyle Shanahan, per usual. Have a good weekend, everybody. Back on Monday. Chris Russell's next.